A 25-year veteran of the classroom, Kurt Russell was first inspired to become a teacher in middle school when he encountered his first black male teacher. Now, as the 2022 National Teacher of the Year, he plans to advocate for classrooms to better reflect the students within them, from a curriculum that reflects their backgrounds and identities to a more diverse teaching profession. Kurt teaches history at Oberlin High School in Oberlin, Ohio. That's where he was born and raised. His classes include African American history, which he has taught since the late 1990s, and race, gender, and oppression, a class he developed. He also serves as faculty advisor for the student-led Black Student Union, whose work has led to positive impacts for students across racial groups. In addition to the classroom and extracurricular duties, Kurt is the head coach for the school's varsity basketball team. He sees basketball as an extension of the classroom and a place where young people can learn about working together and how to handle both adversity and success. Kurt holds a Bachelor of Arts degree with a major in history and a minor in Black Studies from the College of Worcester and a Master of Education in Curriculum and Instruction from Ashland University. He continues to take courses in child development at Oakland City University. He was previously recognized as Teacher of the Year by the Oberlin Heritage Center and the Oberlin chapter of the NAACP, and as Lorain County Basketball Association Coach of the Year and the Northeast Ohio Coach of the Year. Kurt lives with his wife, Donna, in Oberlin. They are the parents of 2 adult sons, Kurt Jr. and Corey. And here he is, the 2022 National Teacher of the Year, Kurt Russell.
Thank you so much. What a warm introduction. I hope you don't mind if I walk around. The podium I am not comfortable with. When I teach, I move around a lot. So if you get a little bit too dizzy, forgive me for walking up and down on the side. First time I'm in Minnesota. First time. And I have to say, what a marvelous city you live in. Just the culture, the environment, the people has really, really inspired me and energized me. I am so thankful to be here. Last night, I posed a question at dinner, and I said, what is the strength about Concordia College? And 2 things resonated with me. Number one, individuals talk about the faculty and the staff at Concordia being very honest, being very straightforward, and being personable. But the second thing that really resonated with me was this idea of service. Service. And as a teacher, that's what I am. I'm a servant. I serve kids, I serve education. And so I am so honored to be with you. And I would just like to, before I begin my formal presentation, just to acknowledge who I consider the invisible laborers. Those individuals within our school districts that are the parapros, the administrative assistants, the custodians, the bus drivers, those individuals that are nameless, but work diligently each and every day. Those individuals that would not stand before you, those individuals that might not receive an honor such as a custodian of the year, but those individuals who are a part of education and who is the mainstream of education as well. So I just want to acknowledge those individuals before I begin. There's 2 really points I would like to make today about teaching. Okay, 2 major points. And before I really talk about those 2 points, allow me just to say that education is a joy. If you've ever been a teacher, if you've ever been in the classroom, you must know this. To work inside of a school district, to work with young people is an absolute joy. It's a joy. It's a joy. It's a joy to watch young people grow, to watch young people develop, to watch young people be resilient. That's the joy of education. But I think we know something about education today. There's a dark cloud. There's a dark cloud over education. And especially as a history teacher, that dark cloud represents many facets for me. It represents the idea of banning of books and materials. It represents the banning of a truthful curriculum. It represents the banning of a non-respectful position for educators. It's a shame that in 2023, policies are being made in education and teachers are not at the table. It's a shame where policies are being made about education by individuals who have never set foot inside of a classroom. That's that dark cloud. That's that cloud that is hovering over education today. And I must also say this, the dark cloud represents compensation. You know, it's a shame where educators today have to take on a second job to make ends meet. Where you are a professional, you went to college, you went to a university, you spent 4 years, and still there are some in 2023 in my home state of Ohio, in my own school district, that has to take on a second job, working at the local nursery, working at Walmart to try to make ends meet. So that's that dark cloud over education. But there's still a joy. There's still a joy about this profession. And the one thing about teachers is that a good teacher, a absolutely good teacher, bring out the best in all students, not just students who, in my hometown, Oberlin College, not just the professor children, but it's those children that lives on Burger Court, small community in Oberlin, small neighborhood, where 15 homes are single parent in this small community, small section of town, where this small community have an annual income of $13,000 a year. Yes, those students who I am speaking of. That a good teacher will bring out the best in every single student. And the good thing about this country, and everything that is good about this country, in my humble opinion, comes from a teacher. Right? And it comes from teachers who believe that your work is worthy. Mr. Miranda told the story about his teacher, where he was in an English class and he gave a presentation that was pretty much off topic. But his teacher saw something in him that caused him to develop this particular play that we all know and love so well. That's his teacher, who said that I must see something in you. And your topic was strange, but what you have to provide is worthy. Can you imagine if Dr. Rimbert would have said, your work is not suitable for this class? Can you imagine? Can you imagine if Dr. Rimbert would have said, you off topic? But see, his teacher saw something within him, his creativity. So that lesson in that English class that he spoke so eloquently about, his teacher said, there's something in you that I'm going to pull out. That's that greatness that teachers provide. But it could be a Miss Duncan as well. It could be Miss Duncan. Miss Duncan, Miss Winfrey's 4th grade teacher, who Miss Winfrey said she provided a spark for me. A spark. I see your work is worthy, but there's a spark that teachers provide. And that's Miss Duncan for Miss Winfrey. And the excitement that Miss Winfrey showed it's the beauty of being a teacher. It's the joy. It's the joy of being a teacher where we know that we are sitting here today because someone inspired us. Someone assisted us in that work. So for Miss Miranda, it was Dr. Rimbert. For Miss Winfrey, it was Miss Duncan. For myself, if I may share, it was two teachers. Two teachers that gave me the idea of discovery. I discover who I am because of these two teachers. My first teacher, can you imagine in kindergarten, I got excited about learning. In kindergarten. And it was my kindergarten teacher. Her name was Miss Francine Toss. 1977, Eastwood Elementary School. Miss Toss. At the time, Miss Toss was this middle-aged white lady with a beautiful smile who greeted each of her students every day with a bear hug. You know those hugs where you just don't want to let go? That was Miss Toss. That special hug. Let me tell you about Miss Toss' kindergarten class at Eastwood Elementary School. There was 15 students. Out of the 15 students, there was 14 students of color. Out of the 14 students of color, there was 13 black students. That was her class, Eastwood Elementary School. One day, Miss Toss told her students, I'm going to read a story to you. It was story time. Miss Toss had a rocking chair. She opened up this book. And the book wasn't about birds. It wasn't about trees. It wasn't about a little train. She began with these words. This is a story about Martin. She continued to read. And she continued to open up the pages. And each page, each image of a page was someone who looked like me. See, it was a story about Martin Luther King Jr. Now understand this. Let's put this in context. This is 1977. This was before Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, before this iconic figure of Martin Luther King Jr. But Miss Toss was intentional about humanizing her students. See, she caused me to discover who I am in education because I saw myself in the curriculum. I saw myself in her lesson. In kindergarten, this middle-aged white woman who could have read any story. She could read a story about birds, trees, whatever the case may be. But she said, no, I'm going to be intentional because I have students who need to see themselves. So I became humanized in education. In kindergarten, I became humanized. I became a part of the studies. That was Miss Toss. See, Miss Toss did not have to do it, but she did. And that's the urging I have with educators today. The one thing we have to do is to make sure that students see themselves in the curriculum. So as a history teacher, this is what I try to do. I create courses. African American history class, race, gender, and oppression. Can you imagine a high school teacher is teaching a class about race, gender, and oppression in 2023? Race, gender, and oppression. Because in room 200, my classroom, the classroom I had for 27 years, the only classroom I ever known, room 200, I have students on the spectrum, students not on the spectrum. I have gay students, I have straight students. I have white students, I have black students. I have female students, I have male students. So why is it that some of my students cannot see themselves in the lesson? Then shame on me because I'm oppressing my students. So I must make sure that when my students come to the classroom, they feel valued, they feel humanized, they feel respected. That's the key, and that's the engagement of learning. Are you able, or are we able as educators to ensure that each student feel a future in education? There's a question that was posed to me. Why is it there's a teacher shortage? Why is where there's not a lot of teachers of color? I have a simple answer for you. It's trauma. It's trauma. Why would you like to go back what I consider a scene of a crime, where you, as an adult, when you was a student, each and every day you walked into that school and there was no image or reflection of you. There was no modeling of what good teaching represents. So why would you go back to become a teacher? That's the shortage, because you don't see any value in it. But I'm so thankful that I had Miss Toss at a young age where I saw value. And I'm so thankful not only for Miss Toss, but this gentleman here, my 8th grade math teacher, Mr. Larry Thomas from Dayton, Ohio. It was 1986, 8th grade year, Langston Middle School. At the time, you can't tell, he had a nice fro. So Mr. Thomas, the first black male teacher I ever had. And so in him, I saw unlimited possibilities. Unlimited possibilities. I saw a gentleman who was loved by every single student. Why? Because he treated students as human beings. Oh, I remember classes where Mr. Thomas standing by his door, greeting us as we walked in. While taking attendance, Mr. Thomas was asking, Kurt, how was the weekend? I saw you playing that basketball game. Oh, Susan, how was that band concert? You played very well. See, he took an interest in us. That was Mr. Thomas, right? So I had a Miss Duncan. I had a Dr. Rimbert. I had teachers that modeled success for me. So that's why I'm standing here today. I'm standing on the shoulders of my teachers who modeled great behavior and who showed the value of teaching. So at this time, let me introduce you to room 200 at Oberlin Senior High School. So because of Ms. Thomas, because of Mr. Thomas, I decided to go into this field. And I have some values that I would like to share with you. But before that, let's take a look at what's happening in room 200. Good morning.
Mr. Russell is such an incredible teacher and person in general.
He's really active when he teaches, like very expressive.
Are you sure? You positive?
It's like he commands like your attention.
He's just really enthusiastic and he relates his curriculum to real world experiences.
Marcus Garvey is saying the same thing.
You walk in there and it's just lesson the whole time.
He wants us to truly engage with one another and embrace new ideas.
On this side, say yes. On this side, say no.
Mr. Russell always strives for every student to succeed in this classroom.
He really opens your mind.
The biggest lesson I've learned from him is to confront the uncomfortable.
Don't be embarrassed, but I really have to call on someone.
He does a really good job of fostering conversations where everyone can have a perspective.
What you see in Kurt Russell is real.
He's such a dedicated person.
Such a vital piece in this community.
Good, caring person.
An amazing role model.
Write this down, Patrick. This is important.
I wish like everybody could take a class with him or just get to have like a conversation with him, because that's how great he is.
That's room 200. So what we do in room 200, we confront the uncomfortable. We confront the uncomfortable in room 200. And how do we confront the uncomfortable? Well, we make sure that students in the classroom feel validated. Sam did. Sam. 5 years ago, Sam was a junior in a class called Race, Gender, and Oppression. Every Friday, we have what we call a Socratic seminar. We make a circle. We go over a current topic that dealt with the unit that we have studied. So this particular Friday, we just finished studying Stonewall, the Stonewall riots. And so the article for the week, the hot topic for the week, was should trans individuals participate in athletics? I'm going to say that again. Should trans individuals participate in athletics? That was the seminar for the week. So before we start talking, there was a TED Talk. We watched the TED Talk. I give students maybe 5-6 minutes to journal their responses. So before we begin really speaking, I allow students to journal. Because a lot of times high school students get emotional and they start saying things without really thinking, right? That's high school. And so students started journaling. After 5 minutes, we began the conversation. In that particular class, there's 17 students. 16 of the 17 students agreed. And they said, no, trans individuals should not participate in athletics. 16 out of the 17. The conversation was going well. There was energy in the classroom, people talking, people raising their hand, but Sam was quiet. He didn't say a single word. 10 minutes passed, 15 minutes passed, and the class was more and more excited. We was getting loud. We was sharing our point of view. Sam remained quiet. He didn't say a word. 25 minutes, 30 minutes passed out of a 50-minute class, and Sam still remained quiet. Then mark 45, the 45 minutes, 5 minutes remaining in the classroom. Sam gently raised his hand. Let me tell you about Sam. Sam was the only student who belonged to the LGBT community, and Sam was transitioning. And Sam spoke with an eloquence that after the 50-minute class, students remained in the classroom for the next 2 periods. Teachers was mad at me because I had their students still in the classroom. But Sam spoke, and he spoke with the eloquence where every student in that classroom, first of all, you should see the tears that was flowing in the class because no one, except for myself as a teacher, knew about Sam. And every student, doesn't matter if you were the toughest football player, had a little water in their eye because Sam spoke. And Sam felt humanized. And Sam speaking allowed other students to reflect their position. See, that's what learning is about. Students reflecting on other stories. Sam was brave, more courageous than I could have ever been, because Sam got personal. Now, what allows Sam to do so is the space that was provided for Sam, the space that all good teachers must provide, a space that is welcoming to all students. That's a joy. And that's the power of what education could do. It could change a 16, 17-year-old opinion on a subject, not by the teacher, but by another student. Because that other student felt empowered. And that's what we need to do. And that's what we need to celebrate in the classroom, is to empower our students. Empower our students. And to make sure that students have a voice and a vehicle to express themselves. So today is a celebration. I celebrate Sam, I celebrate teachers, and I celebrate all students throughout this country. And the celebration for me is the following: that good teachers do three good things. They value students. But what does that look like? A lot of times we throw out words. We value students. For me, valuing students is listening. Listening. How many times, I could count countless times, when I was in school and I raised my hand and I said something in class, and to me, it felt as though the teacher was dismissing my point of view and would say, okay, next question. That's devaluing myself. So I value students by listening to students. So when a student says something, I'm attentively listening. And I'm pulling out what that student is saying and I'm sharing it. See, because I value the stories of each and every one of my students, because each and every one of my students is worthy. Is worthy. So I celebrate teachers for valuing students. I celebrate teachers for sparking an interest in learning. Sparking that interest. Miss Duncan, right? She sparked that interest. Miss Toss, Mr. Thomas, Mr. Marinus, Mrs. Valentine, so forth and so on. The teachers in my career who sparked the interest of learning. And they sparked that interest of learning by allowing me to talk in class. For allowing students to talk in class. For allowing students to have an opinion that might be different than yours. So instead of shutting down students, instead of saying, students, you are totally wrong, unless it harms human rights, then you are wrong. I'll make sure. I will tell you that. But allowing students to think and to develop their own ideals. That's our responsibility. And then finally, as Ms. Toss did for me, is to humanize the existence of our students. To humanize their stories. To respect their stories, their cultures, who they are. Not to be judgmental, not to be rude, not to be disrespectful, but to humanize them. How do we humanize our students? We greet them with a smile. That's good. We say hello. That's good. But more importantly, as I said before, we humanize our students by showing their image within our classroom. It doesn't matter if you teach math. How can you show or humanize the curriculum? There's story problems. There's word problems. Make sure that we have a more cultural relevant curriculum. How can we humanize students in ELA? Well, we do that by making sure we read multicultural literature. How do we humanize students in a science class? Well, we make sure we bring in diverse scientists in the classroom as we study. That's how we humanize our students. That's how we engage our students. See, that's the purpose. That's the purpose. There's two teachers. There's teachers that oppress, and there's teachers that are disruptors. See, you oppress students by not showing them an image. You disrupt, which I hope all of us are. You disrupt education by making sure that you have values, and the values are that students come first, it's student-centered, and that students should see themselves in every work that we do. That's education. That's the joy. That's the purpose. That's my why. Allow me to leave you with this story. Caleb. Had Caleb for 2 classes. First period, 8 to 8:50, U.S. history. It was a survey in the state of Ohio. The benchmarks is that in high school, we look at 1877, right after Reconstruction, to the present time. That's the curriculum. So I had Caleb for U.S. history. Fourth period, from 11 o'clock to 11:50, I had Caleb for African American history class. First period class, I tried to engage Caleb, tried to talk to him. I said, Caleb, why are you not raising your hand? Caleb was really sullen in class. He didn't say too much. Fourth period class, I couldn't keep Caleb from talking. His hand was up every single time. I said, Caleb, please allow me to call on another student. No, Miss Russell, I have some more things I need to say. It was lunchtime. I said, Caleb, do you mind if I speak for you for one moment, please? So after class, Caleb stayed with me. I said, Caleb, first period class is, you're a different student. You quiet. You don't say too much of anything. I'm trying to engage you in conversation, but you don't say too much. Fourth period class, say, Caleb, you talk a lot. Really, you talk a lot. And I just want to know, what's the difference? Caleb, in his simplicity, as a freshman student at the time, said these words that I will never forget. Said, Mr. Russell, no disrespect, but first period class, I don't see myself. Caleb, what do you mean? I see you, Caleb. You in class, other students see you. He said, I don't see myself. And he walked out. I started to think, Caleb is right. A young black child who studied the Revolutionary War in years past. Now, his freshman year, we are studying the Great Depression, World War I, World War II. In every aspect of that curriculum that the state provided, Caleb was even mentioned. He was not mentioned. He was not mentioned. But in African American history class, Caleb was mentioned. And Caleb felt encouraged and engaged. So that's what I'm going to leave you with. I'm going to leave you with making sure that in order to be a teacher that is concerned about all students, is that first, we have to value students, we have to provide a spark to learning, but most importantly, and this is heartfelt, we have to make sure that we humanize the existence of all of our students. That student who is the epitome of what a student should behave like, right? We had those students before who would say good morning to you, who would sit at his or her desk, who would take notes, who would do everything that is good. And then those students that gave me gray hair, that provided stress, even that student. Because all students, every single one, should be humanized. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it.
I do want to start, though. One of the things, a number of things stuck out to me, but one of the things, and I want to tie this to Concordia a little bit because as I heard you speak, I felt this connection with what our school is about and what you are about. Mm-hmm. You talk about confronting the uncomfortable.
Yes.
And at the center of that is something that's lacking today, which is critical thinking.
Yes.
Where I think there's a lot of reasons for that, but I wanted to get your take on that. Like, how do we, and this kind of goes at the center of what the Lorenzen Center is trying to ask, how do we build a more trustworthy world? But it's through that critical thinking. So I just want to get your take on, what are some of the reasons for that? What are some potential solutions? And where do you see it?
Well, that's a great question. And allow me just to really frame it. In education today, we have a lot of buzzwords, right? That we are indoctrinating students. We are providing a a story that should not be told within the classroom. So that's the framework. And so within my particular class, and what we should do as a community of learners is that we should hold true to our values. And the value should be that we should speak truth to power, right? Where we need to develop young people not to be robots, not to regurgitate information, but for individuals to be able to think on his or her own. The issue that I see in education is that we limit what students should be able to think, right? It's gonna get personal, so forgive me if it rubs someone's toes here. If we speak that, as a history teacher, that democracy is for all, and that we should be appreciative of the things that this country has provided. There are segments of this country and communities that don't feel the same, that don't hold those same values. So automatically, instead of listening to the reasons why, we dismiss it, right? So if an indigenous person would say that, this country might not have been kind to me, we dismiss it. If a Black person would say that this country has not been so kind to me, we dismiss it. And that will take us down this road of a continuing aspect of not having discourse that will cause us to think outside the box and to make sure that other people's truth is told. And how can you grow if all of us agree? There's no growth in that.
There's no growth. And I think one of the troubling things, too, that I see from the work that I've done is when you look at the way that we gather information today,
Yes.
is totally different than when you started in the profession.
Yes.
And so you have kids are able to go on their phone, they're able to read things. Our social media and algorithms and what we get fed can really affect a person, too. And that goes into your echo chamber. Yeah. And I think that that's something that can be very challenging as well. But one thing that you talked about, and I think, is creating that safe space.
Yes.
And I think that's incredibly important. How do you go about that? How do you go about, making sure that everybody feels validated? And I do want to share, too, one thing I wanted to follow up on your story about Sam, which is a beautiful story, and I'm really glad you shared it. It felt like at the beginning, almost like that classic 12 Angry Men, right? That movie where it's just one person left in the room to defend.
Yes.
But as it turned out, it kind of took a different turn there. What were you thinking as a teacher, knowing about this student, and then 16 of the 17 were voicing their opinions? How were you creating a safe space there so that Sam didn't feel a particular way?
The first thing that I do, the first day of school, maybe it would take me to the second day of school, I don't create rules in my class. Because rules for me is a hierarchy, right? We create norms. And norms is a community of learners where every single student has to sign the paper on the wall that we accept these norms. And so last year when I was in the classroom, our norms is that if you feel as though you need to walk out of the classroom to take a breath because the topic is getting tough, you may do so. Another norm is that whatever is said in this classroom remains in the classroom unless the person brings up his or her story outside. Another norm is that we will respect one another, we will value each other's opinion, and that we will not be disrespectful to anyone. So that's how I create that. And that's why Sam felt comfortable speaking. And that's why many of my students, as the video showed, feel comfortable
Yeah.
speaking in the classroom because we have these norms, right? And with the norms, it's easy for me because if someone break the norm, it's not they are waiting for Mr. Russell to reprimand. The other students would say, listen, you sign your name on here on this sheet, so you need to follow through.
Yeah.
And there's nothing like peers checking other peers.
Yep. Your energy and passion, it's contagious. You know, even watching, like listening to you speak, but watching the video, I'm like, man, I want to go back to school too. But so we kind of talked about it, but I want to follow up too. You'd mentioned the dark cloud.
Yes.
And to me, and maybe I'm wrong on this, I don't, but underlying that dark cloud is it's that education's been hijacked politically.
Yes.
So it's not going to go away. So what can we do to get back to that really core value of critical thinking? How do we get to that? How do we get to that? How do we get politics out of the classroom?
Well, I think the first thing that we have to do is that on the collegiate level, the public school level, even private school, is that each and every person who's in front of a child must have, in my opinion, these three values. Number one, you have to be trustworthy. Number two is that you have to provide equity within your classroom. And then number three, and which is most important, as I said before, I keep saying this over and over again, that you have to humanize students. So you have to be brave. You have to be courageous. Because I don't think, as you mentioned, politics would never leave the schools. But what is the mainstay? The mainstay are educators. And educators have to stand firm on those beliefs. That means if you have to, and I say this on record before, that the state of Ohio is leaning towards some other states similar to Florida in some of the mindset. I will continue to teach the way I do and the lessons that I teach because I know it's best for students. And if all teachers could try to have that type of boldness, then we could shift education throughout our country.
Yeah, I love it. There's a group here in the Twin Cities. It's called Change the World Challenge. It's a nonprofit, but they're doing a lot of the work that you're kind of talking about too, about we need more representation.
Yes.
We need these students who have not been able to see themselves in the curriculum forever, need to feel that they're a part of the and hear their story as well too. So how can we continue to do that when you have this push and pull where some people and some have a vested interest politically to say, no, we're not going to teach that because we don't want to make particular people feel bad or whatever. But it also then, and I'm sorry, I'm asking, this is a two-part question, is then the second part, the importance of seeing and hearing yourself on the pages of that book in your story. You talked about Caleb at the end.
Yeah. The first thing, to answer your first part of the question, education is this ecosystem where there's many entities that are involved in education. And one of the major entities that are involved, parents. And I will urge parents and community members to really go to school boards. I'm not sure how Minnesota is ran, but in Ohio, it's local control. And so local communities control education. Parents are such a key and vital aspect of making sure that students come first and that we try to keep politics out of the classroom. To answer your second question, what's the importance of making sure that students see themselves in the classroom? It's engagement. It's a reflection of themselves in the lesson. It's value. It's humanizing them. And it's providing them with an opportunity to grow.
Yeah. And when you talk about teachers too, when you have teachers that look like you, it provides a mentorship.
Yes, it does.
And when I have there are so many people. I grew up like myself. I grew up with the lottery ticket. I had the two best parents in the world, and it still took people outside of that ecosystem that said, "Hey, I believe in you. You can do that." Where you can go, and we all need that that mentorship. But oftentimes, it's that person right away in that school that says, "Hey, I can believe you," and you come from the same culture, or you have something in similarities.
Yes, that's so true. And that was Mr. Thomas.
Yeah.
For me, that was Mr. Thomas. But I also like to say this, if you don't mind. Mr. Thomas gave me that reflection piece, but it was mistossed, right? Someone who's from a total different background. In kindergarten, this white woman in front of black students, where she humanized each and every one of us and said, you know what? I believe in you. You are special. Allow me to show you some other individuals in history that are special. Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot for a black teacher or black teachers or even teachers of color to have sole responsibility of teaching students of color and raising students of color. It takes all teachers to do so. It's important.
So one of the shifts, and if anyone has any questions, please feel free to. I'll ask one more, and that'll give a couple minutes if anybody has any. How do we get more energetic, passionate people to want to be teachers in that classroom? I think about Minnesota. I know my sister's a teacher, and so when she was coming out of school, highly competitive, all over the state. Couldn't get a job her first year. Kept plugging away and ended up being, she's a fourth grade teacher to this day and very good at it. And now you'd mentioned the teacher shortage.
Yes.
So how do we get more people like yourself, energetic, passionate about the students who are committed to the profession?
The first thing, it starts with that individual themselves. And it has to start with your why. Now, why do you want to become a teacher? And if you like students, you should not be a teacher.
If you like students.
If you like students, you should not become a teacher. Where you have to absolutely love students to become a teacher.
It's not enough to like them.
You can't like them. Like students, it's like liking a pie.
Yeah.
You could deal with the pie or not.
Yeah, I like it.
You like it.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yes, it's okay. Like, you have to absolutely love students and young people to be effective. And I think that's the first thing how we could interject more individuals in the profession. Number two, I said this earlier, you have to pay teachers. And someone mentioned this, well, it shouldn't be about the pay. Other professions don't say that.
Yep.
I mean, I never heard a doctor who said, you know what, you could take $15,000 from me. I'm going to work at Walmart. I never heard a lawyer say that. I never heard a CEO say that. I never heard a business person say that. So why is it always that teachers have to sacrifice for the good? Right? You got to pay teachers. And number two, you have to model good. Number three, you have to model good teaching. So how can you bring a young person into the classroom? Well, you model good teaching, where that young person would say, wow, that teacher is pretty cool. That teacher has a lot of energy. I wouldn't mind being a teacher one day. But if you just sit at your desk and pass out worksheets all day long, who would like to go into that profession?
Yep.
It seems boring. It seems like you're not engaged. So we have to model great teaching.
And I hope teachers recognize just the important role that they play and that they're valued and that we so much. I mean, to your point, I remember the teachers who totally changed my life.
Yes.
Right? Because of the way that they taught, their energy, their passion, their belief, and so it's an important role in our schools and in our communities.
And you also remember the teachers who were not as good.
You do.
Yes.
I had a 10th grade teacher who he was 2 years from retiring and every day would cross off how many days he had left. I remember that one too. Not just the good ones. Did we have any questions from out there before? Okay.
Okay.
I'll just run the mic here. There you go.
I just want to give you a lot of support. I retired from that building across the street, Target Corp, a long time ago, but I'd been 40 years with them. And one of the first things that happened is my pastor said, come with me. I want you to come up to Plymouth Christian Youth Center on the north side. We have an opening on the board. And I joined that board. And for 24 years, I was on that board. And I've seen what happens. We are what is called the Arts and Technology High School, but we are an alternative high school dedicated to giving students a positive, relevant, rigorous, and community-connected education. In an alternative school, where it's very difficult for these students because they have so much pressure on them, and they're in large classes, and when they come to PCYC, they're kind of kicked out of their school, and we bring them in, and we turn them around with exactly the same elements that you're talking about. And most recently, we received a wonderful award from Best Buy to put in a Best Buy Teen Tech Center. And we have 85 students now enrolled in the Best Buy Teen Tech Center. And it is paying off wonderfully. And we can graduate now in an alternative school, maybe 75% of the students. And these students are under tremendous pressure at home. But it's the teachers that, if the student isn't attending, they call them at home. They'll get in their car and go get them and bring them to school. And the students understand that, but they have gang pressure, they have drug pressure, and all these other things that are in their lives. But they've come to love school. It's just an amazing story. Started by students from Luther Seminary back about 75 years ago.
I applaud you, and I applaud the teachers at this school, because it seems as though the teachers love the students. And not only that, but they humanize the students as well. Thank you.
Yeah, first of all, thank you, for this. Have you had a chance to talk to any of the other students that, when you were so influenced by those two particular teachers, if they had similar experiences or if their experiences were slightly different in terms of how they may have been inspired?
I'm sorry, in terms of Ms. Toss and Mr.
Right,
Thomas?
exactly.
Yes. Thank you for that question. Ms. Toss still, now she owns a floral shop in town. And Mr. Thomas just moved to Richmond, Virginia. And the reason why I say that, Ms. Toss is still like this beacon, iconic figure in the community, where if you bring up Ms. Toss in Oberlin, individual my age smiles what happened. And if you bring up Mr. Thomas, it will be the same. So yes, not only did those two teachers really impacted me, but impacted thousands of students who went through Oberlin Public Schools. Did they also inspire other people to get into education? Yes. My classmate is now the principal at the elementary school in Oberlin. Another one of my classmates, a teacher in Columbus. So yes, they have.
Other questions? All right, you get another one.
How radical or kind of getting outside the standard were those two teachers? Do you think, especially I think you said the first one, Mrs. Toss,
Yes.
was like in the 1970s?
Yes.
Was what she was doing, I'm sure it probably wasn't in the curriculum. She wasn't following. She saw a need. She loved her students. She saw an opportunity.
Yes.
And
so there was nothing in kindergarten, the kindergarten curriculum, the benchmark, that told Ms. Toss to read a story about Martin Luther King Jr., right? But she did. So I love the word that you used. She was radical. But I have to put this caveat. The town that I'm from, Oberlin, is very progressive, right? It's the the site of Oberlin College that many of you might have heard of. Is the first college to admit women, the first college to admit African Americans. So that's always been our foundation. But Ms. Toss did not shy away from that. She continued that. So yes, very radical. Mr. Thomas, very radical. I recall lessons in Mr. Thomas' class, story problems in math, where we was doing averages of NBA basketball players, where we were doing averages of Grammy Award winners, because all students love music. And so it was like a catch there. So yes, very radical. It wasn't about, yes. Yes. And that's the privilege I have, right? That's the privilege I have teaching in a community like Oberlin, where I know, and I need to name this, where many, many educators who feel the same way that I feel do not have that same privilege, where they are stuck, forgive me for saying that, but they are stuck in a situation where it's hard for them to really express the way they would like to. And it's easy for me to say, hold true to your values, be bold and courageous, but at the same time, you need a job. You need a job. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No, so to your point there, and this is the thing that you left us with on the last thing that you left us was valuing students, spark learning, humanize existence of students. But that spark learning aspect, I think, is really an important one too. And that was something you brought out earlier in your talk. The art of teaching is the art of assisting discovery. And to tie it, you're doing it in your classroom, obviously in a phenomenal way. But one of the things I love about Concordia and what we're doing too is through that lens of critical thinking, but it's become more about, hey, what is your passion? Like what drives you? And it can be something different, or even just like from a foundation of skills and traits that you're learning, it can change over time, right? You do have the ability to reinvent yourself or adapt through some of, but I think it's important to find that thing that you wake up and you are so excited about, whatever that might be.
Yes. Great point. Excellent point.
Here, Mark.
How do you keep your cup filled? And I asked that. My wife retired from teaching this last year, not because she wanted to, but for health reasons. And for her, like you, it was a calling, it was a passion, and she worked much of her career with kids from at-risk situations. I hear your story and I hear how you teach, and I see a lot of what Beth used to do. She was, coach, parent, social worker, all of that, going above and beyond because she loved those kids. It also broke her. I mean, at times, it just. And how can we as a community help teachers keep their cup filled so they can be what you are and what others are?
Thank you for that question. Very powerful question. Teaching is a hard job, as you know through your wife. It's a job where it's a high rate of burnout. You go so hard, and then sometimes you don't see instantly an impact. But what keeps my cup filled is two things. Number one is the resilience of my students, right? Because my students are going through situations and things that I never would have imagined going through. Right? And then number two, what keeps my cup filled is that I know deep down inside that I'm reaching at least one student, one person. If I could just reach one, that's why I go into every year. If I could just reach one student, then that is impactful for me. One student. Yeah. I know, hopefully, I have reached more. But I go in each year, if one student I could reach who might be troubled, then job well done.
I think maybe we have time for one more. Kristen, did I see your hand sneaking up there? You can take our last question.
So I want to continue a little bit about what Mark was asking. We talked about this yesterday a little bit, where you're seeing good things happening. And I think to Mark's really good question, what can we do as community members and supporters of education to help support teachers?
Number one, believe in teachers. Believe in the expertise of teachers. Number two, since schools is driven by policies, please, please, please attend board meetings to shape policies for your community, policies that are good for kids. And I want to make sure that we are all on the same page when I say this. And this not being disrespectful to any teacher. The focal point of education should be student-driven. Student-driven. It should not come to a point where when we sit at the table, it's about what Kurt Russell could receive. It's about what is best for kids. And I think those are the two things that could really help educators. Number one, trust teachers. Trust their expertise in the classroom. And number two, if you have to send a mob to school boards when things are not right, do so to make sure that we change policies that will be beneficial for students.